So appropriate. So hi everybody, I'm back. I'm back, sorta back. Sorta back, you know. So I've spent the last 2 weeks roaming through Scotland and seeing sacred sites and doing sacred ceremony and drinking from sacred wells and standing on sacred stones and visiting the ancestors. And it was quite a journey. And it began with a ceremony where each of us took a marble. And these were antique marbles that British children had played with a long time ago. And each one of us took the marble to remind us to remember to play. And so we did play. We had some good times. We wandered through the shops in Edinburgh and found a book called How to Speak French Like a Spanish Cow. And what it had was, it had phrases that were idioms. So for instance, the phrase, 2 fingers up your nose, in French, actually means easy peasy. So when we were going along, we'd go. And we went to one place called Maze How, which is an ancient temple that was sealed, and it was like 4,700 years old. 4,700 years old. And and it was used for sacred ceremony. There were no bones in it. They call it a tomb, but it didn't have any bodies in or anything. So they think it was used for a sacred ceremony or something. They don't know what. But it has an alignment so that on the winter solstice, the sun shines right through the chamber on a specific place in the wall. So they knew the alignment of the planets. They knew when the solstices and the equinoxes were and all of these wonderful things. They sealed this thing, and then about 900, when the Vikings invaded, they got caught in a blizzard and they broke their way into this chamber. Now, they said, because they graffitied the walls with their knives. And so one of them wrote in rune, one style of rune. He wrote this whole sentence, and then he wrote another sentence in a different style of rune. And when you translate the sentence, it means, I am the best rune writer in Norway. Another of the ancient graffiti says, for a good time call. You know, I mean, it was the equivalent of, for a good time call, the widow so-and-so, you know. So, you know, little has changed. You know, we're expecting, the ancient ruins. What will they say? What will they say? I'm the best rune writer. It's like, not what we were expecting. Nothing, earth-shattering, nothing profound. Just human beings trapped in a blizzard, hanging out with nothing to do but write graffiti on the wall. But we did visit many, many sacred sites, and I was fortunate that we were on a bus that had music playing from a wonderful musician named Steve MacDonald. And he sings about Scottish history, and so we had these wonderful Scottish history songs playing while we were driving through this magnificent countryside. And, seeing the glens and seeing Loch Lomond. And when we stopped at Loch Lomond, they sang, if you take the high road and I take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland for ye. And, I've heard that song a million times. I didn't realize that it was written by a man who was dying. And when he said, you take the high road, you're going to be in the world of the visible. And I'll take the low road, I will be in the world of the invisible. And I'll be there before you. So I had never realized that aspect of that song, and how all of these people, made these monuments. And at the time, they took care, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew why they were doing it, and they built these enormous stones and circles that were not only spiritual. You say, oh, we think they had some spiritual meaning. Well, those people, spiritual was everything. Everything had spirit. The rock had spirit. The grass had spirit. The animals had spirit. Everything was spirit to them. And so they had this feeling of everything being spiritual, and they expressed it, and they also were scientific, because they were creating these circles like a scientific instrument that would tell everybody when the solstice was going to be, when the equinox was going to be, when it was time to plant, when it was time to harvest, when it was time to rest, when it was time to celebrate. They knew all these things. They knew all these things. And they disappeared. We do not know what they knew. All that they said, all that they did was lost. And so it reminded me, and then we saw many abbeys, ancient abbeys. The abbey on Iona was founded by St. Columba in 593. We're talking 1,600 years ago. There was this founding of this abbey. All of these stones, the kings of Scotland are buried there. Where? Who knows? There are stones there and you can't read them. The words are gone. Macbeth is buried there. Where? Who knows? He's there somewhere. So this reminded me of a poem by Shelley called Ozymandias. The poem says, I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Nothing material lasts. Nothing material will last forever. And so it's up to us to connect with that which is timeless, eternal, changeless. What remains of all of these people and all of these beings are stories and songs and paintings. It is art that we create, the songs that we sing, the stories that we tell that lasts. So, you don't know anything about St. Columba, I didn't. But there are songs and stories about him and his brother Oran. And when they came to this place to build their abbey, they would build the abbey, and then the next day all their work would have fallen down. And so St. Columba had a dream, and this was all in a song. St. Columba has a dream that says there has to be a sacrifice. We're in 593 now, and they're still doing sacrifice. There has to be a sacrifice in order for this temple to stand. And so Oran, who is the brother of St. Columba, and I don't know if it's a brother in terms of the monk, but they said his brother. So he decides that he will give his life. And so they bury him alive and build a foundation over him. But being a story, 20 days later, he pops his head up and they ask him, well, how was it? And he says, not all that are saved are happy, and not all that are damned are lost. In other words, forget that whole heaven and hell thing. You know, we progress, we go into the next realm, but just because we're in the next realm doesn't mean we're all in bliss. It's up to us to be in bliss now. Can we be in bliss now? Can we open to that now? And part of that is being able to speak the truth and hear the truth. You know, Robert Burns, that famous Scottish poet, said, you know, what a gift had God to give us to see ourselves as others see us. And so part of this is about stepping up to hear the uncomfortable truths. Sometimes the right thing to do is to tell somebody something they don't want to hear. So another book, besides the book that we're reading this month, which is called Fix It, which I was a little disappointed in because it's very oriented towards business, but you know, we're all in the business of living. And so it does have some wisdom for us. But there's another book called Healing the Heart of Democracy by Parker Palmer. The courage to create a politics worthy of the human spirit. And in this, he talks about having a workshop in Washington, D.C. It was a weekend retreat for elected and appointed officials. Now, these people were not political hacks. They were committed citizen leaders who invested long hours trying to fix vexing social problems. They were caught in painful conflicts between their values and power politics. They were all seeking to reclaim the ethic that had motivated them to serve democracy in the beginning. So, Parker Palmer creates what he calls circles of trust. He creates an atmosphere where people can be vulnerable, where they can tell the truth, where they can listen to their own, what he calls their inner teacher, where they can listen to their own inner teacher. And so he had this one gentleman who had been a farmer in northeastern Iowa for 25 years before becoming a person at the Department of Agriculture. And he was having a specific challenge in that he had to decide a policy related to the conservation of topsoil. Now, topsoil is a very precious commodity. We all remember hearing about the Dust Bowl in the 30s, where the topsoil all blew away, and there was, you know, the crops were ruined, and it was just created this huge dust bowl. And so conserving the topsoil is very critical. And so he said, you know, the agribusiness practices were focused on short-term profits over sustainability. So he said, in my farmer's heart, I know what to do. In my farmer's heart, I know what to do. But he knew that it was going to get him in trouble because his boss was beholden to agribusiness. So at the end of the weekend, he decided to go with his farmer's heart. When he was asked how his boss would respond, he replied, "During my time in this circle, I've understood something important. I don't report to my boss. I report to the land. I don't report to my boss. I report to the land." And he said, think for a moment about the nature of the knowledge held in this farmer's heart. His emotions were clearly involved. He cared deeply about the land. His caring was interlaced with a wealth of scientific and experiential knowledge drawn from academic research and a quarter century of farming. He understood the limits and potentials of the land and of the farmer's skillful means, the short and long-term consequences of various courses of action, and the complex and sometimes contradictory demands that come from a farmer's life. The man from agriculture made a decision based on knowledge, based from diverse sources that interact and inform each other only at the core of the human self. How did he get to that inward place? By refusing to ignore the tension between his values and the pressure politics. Instead, he held that tension patiently and reflectively, as only the heart can do, until it broke his heart open to a way forward. Until it broke his heart open to a way forward. In this book, Fix It, there's a story of a CEO who did what's called a 360-degree review, where everybody, his superiors and his peers and his subordinates all review him. And the review was almost 100% that he was not a good listener. And that when it came to decision making, he always played the I'm the boss card. He always didn't take other people's input, and he acted on his own. And it was having a bad effect on the business. It was funny because they told him these results in a meeting with 50 of his peers and his managers, his top executives, and he was visibly flustered, and he said, I'm wrestling with this whole thing. Should I be taking this feedback personally? And about half of them said, no, it's okay, supportive, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he needed to take it personally. He needed to take it personally because when he wasn't, how he approached alignment and collaboration was damaging the performance of others, squelching productivity, eroding the business's bottom line. And it's hard to say the things that people sometimes need to hear. Now, these folks who wrote this book, their job is to tell people the hard things. And so they told them, hey, take this personally. You are having this effect on your people. You need to listen. And they said the feedback that you got was not given in a mean-spirited way. It was given in the hope that something good would come from it. It's not just about you, it's about the business and wanting the highest and best for the business. And so he finally got it. And when he did, that shift happened. As Mark Twain beautifully said, it's not what you know. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So I had this experience, they suggest, the authors suggest that if there is a hard conversation coming up, you need to ask for permission from the person before you speak it. You need to say, can I talk to you about this? They say, no, you can't do anything. But if they say yes, then that at least opens a window for something to happen. Then make sure that you're framing it within the right context. In other words, it's not a blanket observation. It's an observation about a specific thing that you can point to and say, this is a problem. Go right to the topic. Don't beat about the bush. Just go right there, say it, keep the discussion on point, say the hard thing with a strong dose of empathy, be respectful, be polite, be calm, and tie your comments back to what it is you're hoping will come from this. What outcome are you looking for from this discussion? So have that clear in your mind before you go. Now, what he says is, the purpose is to bring the person into alignment with an aspect of reality that they may not have perceived or acknowledged. to bring them into alignment with an aspect of reality that they may not have perceived or acknowledged. So what is reality here? Reality is something that we are creating all the time through our thoughts and through our agreements. We are creating a reality. And so they suggest 5 clues for determining whether you possess a fairly accurate view of reality. First is, can you effectively state the case of those who do not agree with you? Can you effectively state the case of those who do not agree with you? Have you spoken with the person you know will most likely disagree with you? Have you gone out of your way to seek the views of people you would ordinarily not speak to, but who might offer some insight into the situation? Have you confided in the person you most trust and have convinced them that you really want to know what they think? And have you confided in the person you most trust and have convinced them that you really want to know what they are hearing? What they are hearing. So I had an experience in Scotland because I was traveling with my sister. And my sister made me aware of a behavior that I was not aware of, which was, apparently, we would be together. I would be looking like I was listening to her, but my mind was somewhere else. She would tell me something, and then a few minutes later, I would tell her the same thing she had just told me, like I had just come up with that idea. Now, I did not realize I was doing this. I was totally unaware. But she was my loving sister and said it in a loving way. She said, "Do you do this because I'm the baby sister?" And it was like, oh my God, I would never, ever have disregarded anything that she said intentionally. I would never have not acknowledged her. You know, that would be the furthest thing from my conscious mind, and yet I had this habit of zoning out and then apparently hearing it in my subconscious and then blurting it out like I just come up with it. So, you know, it's like she lovingly told me that truth that I needed to hear, because I didn't want her going around thinking, she doesn't listen to me. I'm not present for her. And so I consciously made the decision to be present, to listen, to know what it was she was saying to me, and to acknowledge what she was saying to me, and to realize, you know, that connection and deepen that connection. And so we did have a wonderful time together, but that was an example of her telling me a hard thing. You know, we don't like to tell people things like that. From a spiritual perspective, we've always talked about the Sufi gates. We've talked about what you say to other people has to have some thought behind it. And the thoughts are, these 4 Sufi gates are, is what you're saying true? And it's true because you know it's true from your personal experience, not from anything you've heard on the news or read or somebody told you. You're saying it because you've had a personal experience. You know it is true. If you don't know that, if you just heard it from somebody else, you don't know that it's true, so you don't pass the gate. You don't say it. The second gate is what you're saying necessary? Do they really need to hear this? The third thing is this going to be beneficial? Is what I'm saying helpful? Is it going to help the situation? And the fourth thing is, can it be said out of love with kindness? Can it be said out of love with kindness? So if you cannot pass any one of those gates, you keep your mouth shut. And I know there's a community down in another part of the state where a friend was telling me, she asked this guy a question about something, and he looked at her for a minute and he said, "Can't pass the gates." So he wasn't going to speak because he couldn't get through the gates. So, it's not just the courage to say the hard thing, it's the courage to listen to the hard thing. And to step into that place of getting in touch with that inner knower, that inner teacher, that inner wisdom, and taking the action that is ours to take. To do that right thing. And know that it is the right thing. And be prepared to experience whatever consequences come from that right thing. In the Bible it says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear." So as we remember that our purpose here is to love, we remember that the word courage comes from the French word cœur, which means heart. So it's connecting with the wisdom of our heart, which is so much more vast than the wisdom of our brain. Our heart tells us more than our reason can sometimes. And so, our affirmation for this week is, I have the courage to follow my heart. 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 And so it is. Let's stand for our congregational song.